Good morning, Network in Action. We got another group coaching today. Today we've got Dr. Fred with us, and I'm really excited about this one because I met Dr. Fred on LinkedIn just like we do with a lot of people. And the thing that really caught my attention was his tagline, like his number one banner, his whole thing is enjoying problems. And if you're anything like me, you're probably thinking enjoying problems. I'm not the type of person that enjoys problems, but where's this going to go? I don't know. He has a picture with him and Dr. Phil. I'm kind of confused where this is going. I'm really interested, but when you click on enjoying problems, it takes you to his website where it has his book titled Enjoying Problems: How Entrepreneurs Master Their Fear and Solve Their Problems. And I think that's very applicable to all of us as business owners in Network in Action because we all have problems. We all have fear. We all have anxiety. We all have a clustered ADHD mind, most of us, that have 10,000 things going on. But Dr. Fred has developed different questions. He developed a course. He developed everything to help us kind of streamline that and connect the dots from A to Z. So super excited for this. Dr. Fred, what do you got for us?
Well, I feel like I'm found some of my tribe when you mentioned the ADHD, because we all are kind of that way, because we're neurodivergent, we're lateral thinkers, we're combining, chocolate and peanut butter, that's entrepreneurship. I tell people that my own personal version of it is the next level. It's called ADOS. So not ADHD, but ADOS. And ADOS stands for Attention Deficit. Oh, squirrel. So if you can relate to that, or, as the kids say, I'm smelling what you're stepping in. Well, I think it's going to be helpful because that capacity to see all these options is what's great. But the other problem with that is, I think it was Confucius, or should have been him, person who chases two rabbits catches no rabbits. So we've got a focusing challenge as well in this whole game. And so most everything in my life is, if I hadn't lived it out or experienced it or struggled through it, I don't have a lot of credibility, even in my heart, to really share it with people. So I guess what I would like to do is share a little bit of some of my journey and how I think about this with problems like you share. I think you're right. Everybody has anxiety. Everybody has problems, except those who have the problem of not having anxiety about lying to themselves. So that's its own category. But the rest of us are a bunch of human beings. And so it's kind of a trick, because if you solve your problems, you won't have anxiety. Fair enough? But if you have anxiety, it's hard to solve problems. Just like, I don't know if you've known people, or maybe you had it with test anxiety. So like, everything for the test, and you go in there, and because you don't test well, or somebody said something, or something's going on, you freak out, and it's like your mind goes blank. Even walking to the test, we used to, don't bump into me. I don't want it to leak out, because of that anxiety dynamic. And what anxiety does is it shuts down this prefrontal cortex, this thing we think with, shuts it down so we can just run or escape. And this is, I noticed somewhere in your stuff, it seems like, were you a Marine? Am I making that up?
Yep, I was in the Marine Corps. Got out in 2017.
Great, thank you for your service. So I've known some Marines. One of my favorite was a friend of mine who had been the president of Halliburton about before Nick Cheney. And he had survived, I think, 5 or 6 beach landings in the Pacific, including Okinawa. So he would constantly teach me things about Marines. But, even there, in the Marines, some of your training is, part of what they're doing is training you to do things you need to do without having to think about them. That's why you have to go over them a bunch of times. So you overlearn it, so it becomes automatic. Well, it's a similar thing with problem solving and anxiety, Stephen, that when we have a good method, a good process, and a way to chill ourselves out, we're able to attack the thing in a wise, sane, almost empowered way. Something I've gone back through the book. I'm about to have it available in a published form. But I've gone back through and I've rewritten key ideas around the writing style of the Mandalorians. I don't know if you're familiar with Mandalorians, but it's really quite cool. Each little step, when I share it with my wife, that because I'm writing this thing about honor and problems, and this is the way. And I'm going to tell you, gang, entrepreneurial Mandalorians, enjoying problems is the way. That your whole employment, everything you do is solving problems. Every job you've ever had, you're hired to solve problems. In fact, this is the secret of employment. You get hired to solve a problem, right? And if you solve that problem, you'll get to keep your job. If you'll solve more problems than you're hired for, they'll give you a raise and higher positions. And if you make more problems than you're hired to solve, you'll get fired. This is the way the game, this is the way. And so if we take a different, bit bolder approach and understand problems are how we make money, how we help people, how we make a difference, why people listen to us, they are incredible. They're the things, they're the gifts from the galaxy, as a Mandalorian would say. They're the gifts, people. And when you learn to love them because you have figured out how to chill out your anxiety and attack them in a way that allows you to solve them, the way I like to say it, forever, then the game's afoot, and life is really a different experience because you're not going through constantly trying to get away from problems. You're not trying to look, we're not going out hunting necessarily, but you're not afraid to, and that makes it great. So let me pause for a second. Any questions going through your head just now? I mean, I've got plenty to share, but I just want to know, like I said, I don't know your world exactly and who all this reaches to. So give me some feedback about what I'm saying so far.
So it's the framework, right? It's the lens in which you view the world. And that's 90% of the battle. You're viewing it through a different lens of, hey, problems exist, yes. A lot of us think we don't want problems in our life because problems equal anxiety and more issues. But if you just change your lens out and look at it from an opportunity perspective, the more problems, the more money. The more problems, the more opportunity. The more problems, the more solutions. And that simple lens change makes all the difference, especially for entrepreneurs.
Exactly. Perfect. There's a guy named Emerson who made a statement. He said, the greater part of courage is having done it before. So what we're really talking about is actually skill, because when you have the skill, you're not scared the same way. When you know how to break down a rifle, not a gun made for shooting, not for fun, sir. When you know how to break down a rifle, I got in trouble for that one day by him in the hospital. So we need to get a gun in your hand. He said, it's a rifle. Excuse me. But if you know how to break it down and put it back together, if it gets dirty or soiled or something, you know how to do that really quickly. That's not a scary thing. That's just worked process, right? Something like that is the same thing with problem solving. Most of us don't look at problem solving as a process, but it's more like a mystical, magical, if I get a unicorn and some lavender and I brainstorm with a group and I trip over something and I see a commercial that uses a word I hadn't thought of, and then poof, oh, I got the answer. Okay, that happens, I guess. But it seems to me if we can be more methodical about it, we have a much better shot at solving it. So I want to talk about some of that process in a minute. But like I said, if we don't deal with anxiety first, the problem solving is gummed up. So let's talk about anxiety. So what kind of anxiety specifics do entrepreneurs face? Throw me out some things.
Fear of getting started, fear of failure, fear of success, fear of disappointment, and fear of kind of criticism, I think, are some of the biggest ones. That in that, obviously, you have many different subcategories, but
Yeah, yeah. Like it might get going, but then it won't last, right? So there's that. So yeah, those are all exactly the kind of things we face. There can be other things about it's even more related to like family or spousal support, you know, that's still people's kind of approval or disapproval, but there are these more subtle things in here. If I fail, what do the kids think? You know, my legacy, there could be other things. But all these things have something in common. All anxiety has the exact same thing in common, and it's the future. So the way this works is if you struggle with depression, discouragement, that's all about the past. If you struggle with anxiety, it's all about the future. Okay. And some people, you know, obviously there are always people that try harder, and they can be depressed about the past and think it's going to continue in the future. And so they have both depression and anxiety. But what we're looking for with anxiety is to recognize that it's about the future, and specifically it's about the future that's going to stink. It's going to be bad. It's going to be terrible. It's going to be horrible. In fact, it's going to be so bad I sort of don't even want to think about it, but I get stressed when I do think about it. And so what's going on is we've got this picture or idea out in the future of what's going to happen, and it's going to be horrible. So I was talking with someone just recently who's going through a divorce, and that's plenty difficult, but it was a lady, and she's struggling with things to do, and she's talking about how they're going through this process, and she's sitting here describing to me things she's trying to do to control her husband, who's fixing to not be her husband, because she's trying to protect the kids. So she's trying to impose all these weird rules while they're splitting their lives up, you know, wanting to control what they do, where they're going to live, what they will, he'll take care of the kids when she's not around. And I'm going, I said to her, I said, so why don't you just go ahead and pick out his next wife too? I mean, you could get some resumes together, you know, you can make a big list of attributes. You could interview him for him, give him like the top 3 candidates, picture, all the rest of that stuff, you know, for the kids, just to make sure he marries the right person this time, you know. And she laughed, and I laughed, you know, she's probably laughing, crying, but you know, this controlling thing we do is born from that. We've imagined a future, and then it makes us control. One of my mentors called this foinking. So foinking is spelled F-O-I-N-C. Okay. Foink, fear of imaginary negative consequences. So what that means is you've made up something in your head about the future, and you're imagining how bad it's going to be, and it makes you what we call a good person up to no good. So you're a good person, you want to help, but you're up to no good because you're hyper controlling about everything. You're micromanaging, you're controlling everybody, the people, the clients, the material, everything. And because you think if you don't control that first domino, the whole universe is going to fall apart. And usually when we track it out, you know, what's bad, and eventually it's because we're going to die alone. That's just where it all tends to go when you study the sequence. What you want to do is kind of wake yourself up and recognize that you're not a prophet, which means you're not a flawless a person with the ability to literally know the future and prophesy it exactly. The reason you're anxious is because you're acting like a prophet. You've got it figured out. In fact, everybody that's anxious, I can tell you one thing about them: they are truly a man or woman of faith, because they have such strong faith that they believe they know the one thing that could possibly happen in the future, and they've ruled out all other possibilities, and that one possibility is bad. So it's actually a faith problem. So if you want to get your anxiety to go away, we've got to kill your faith. Okay. So I have a past life as a pastor. I'm a man of faith. I'm big on faith. If I ask you a question, you say faith, I'll give you a B+. I don't even care what the course is. So I'm a fan. But on anxiety, it gets in our way because we're believing in the wrong thing. we're believing in something bad happening, and that doesn't let us look at options. So here's one of the easiest things to do. What we do, Stephen, is we generate, one of our tricks is to generate 2 more options besides the bad option you figured out. So in other words, we're aiming for 3 plausible options. One may be better than the other, like boxing, the biggest and the baddest doesn't always win, but that's how you bet. I get that one's probably better than the other, but that doesn't mean anything. Sometimes the little guy just goes out there and whoops him. Sorry, that's the way it goes. So when we can generate 2 more, in other words, a total of at least 3 plausible options, it collapses our anxiety. It's one of the ways to do it. It just literally collapses it. So let me show you how this would work. Throw out something, innocuous that it'd be ideal if it's something you could be anxious about, in your life. But even, I have a friend, who has a friend who this is what he struggles with. If we could give a live example of this, I think it'll help everybody.
Liz, do you have anything that you would like to participate with?
Well, it doesn't have to be a big thing.
A big problem, you mean?
Yeah, something that gives you some anxiety, that stresses you a little bit when you think about it, you worry about it.
Yeah, I worry about, and again, I'm a woman of faith as well, so thank you for mentioning that.
Sure.
One of my biggest concerns in my life right now is my mother. She is 85 years old. She lives by herself most of the time, but my son's helping her. He's in his 30s. He stays down there with her quite a bit. But she has dementia, and she's a widow. My dad died a long time ago, so I pray about it a lot, but I'm anxious about it as well.
Good. So let's think about that. So, my mother passed, and she didn't have dementia. She had stubbornness, which is a different version of something very difficult. So maybe another mental disorder. I'm not sure. But let's think this through. So part of what we want to do is try to ask the question, why? So what I mean by that is, so that worries you. Why? What about it worries you? So she has dementia, and and when I ask these questions, they're totally sincere. You know the answers. I don't. So I don't guess what you're thinking, because it could be totally different what I think. I might think because she's going to tell the neighbors about that time I, bought and sold cats, to Honduras, I don't know. But yours may be she's going to burn down her house. So what I'm wondering is, what exactly why is that a problem? Why is that a worry for you?
Mm-hmm. Because when she's there
I've
by
never
herself,
sold a cat in my life, just in full disclosure.
I think you hit it on the nose there, and I'm fearful that something's going to happen to her when she's there by herself, like she falls down the steps, or she forgot that she left something on the stove, or something of that nature, because she lives up on a mountain, really, basically, and she's got a big view of this wonderful valley, but she doesn't have very many neighbors at all. She lives down in Kentucky, way out in the country. And
I
so,
grew up in Alabama. I'm very familiar with the idea of out in the country.
yes, sir. So that's one of my biggest concerns, is that something's going to happen to her and she's going to lay there and suffer, or maybe die without anyone there to help her.
Gotcha. And why is that bad?
I don't really want her to suffer. I mean, if she just fell and passed away, of course we all pass away. But I think I would feel guilty that I didn't do something to be proactive to help her. But she has the gift of stubbornness as well, and I think that's where I get it. I'm pretty sure. So she's refusing to sell her property and her big farm and all that, and move into a community living place where she can be with other seniors.
So let me understand this. So she's refusing to sell. She's still clinging on to her lifestyle that she likes on the mountain, her world. She's lived there how long?
About 28 years now.
So she lived there since your son that looks in on her since he was 2, something like that, right?
Yeah, my
And
son's 38, so
oh, is he that much older? Okay, so
yeah.
10, or whatever. Yeah, but she's lived there 28 years. She knows this world. She has her life. She knows where the coffee is and the bathroom and the bed and whatever she has there. And she is refusing to sell it and do anything. So she's got beginnings of dementia, but not entirely, apparently, because she can reason about this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so given all that stuff, I'm just trying to understand it right now. Given all that stuff, why would it be your fault?
Because I'm the oldest sibling, I think. Feel like it falls on my shoulders.
Right. So given that she's choosing, why is it Liz's fault?
It's really not. I just care about people a lot, and her being my mom,
And that's
I
great
feel like
too.
I should be doing
But
something, but I feel
yeah,
helpless.
right. Because and here's one of our anxiety points. When we spend energy on things we can't control, it really stresses us out.
It
You know.
does. Indeed.
So let me just tell you, if you have a sales force and you have a sales goal for them, let's bring it back to entrepreneurship. We'll come back to your mom in a sec.
Okay.
So when you have a sales force and you set goals for them of selling some volume of widgets, whatever you're selling, or some number, I want you to sell, you're going to sell $500,000 worth of this widget. This is this quarter. This is your quarter. Okay. So can any salesperson control how much they sell? Like, can they really control the money that they bring in? And the answer is going to be, if you think it through, no. And let me assure you, I have some background on this. Forever ago, there's a time when I sold Electrolux vacuum cleaners door to door. One of the more painful things, but I did find I could sell one out of every 2 I ever showed. So some knack in there, I guess. But the fact is, you can't control that number. What you can control is the number of people you talk to a day. So the metric is the number of people you talk to a day, how you do your sales presentation, how you're getting in front of other people, some game like that. Those are controllable things, and those don't stress us because we can control them. But these things we can't control, we just increase our anxiety. And like with your mom, you can't really control it. So not yet. And if you need to control it, get a court order and go control her. But you're playing that game, and the game is going to get solved when you all figure out, all right, mom, what's the trigger? What's the point at which you got to sell this thing? Is it a broken hip? Is it falling down the steps? If I find you out back, cooking pine trees and eating them, what's the point that we're going to trigger this thing? And have that kind of conversation, because you can't control her, not yet, right?
Right.
And so then we can think it through with some options. So look, it could be she could muddle along for a few more years, and she would tell you, yeah, I fell and I was alone and they didn't find me for 24 hours, but man, I'd take that over the 3 years extra I got of enjoying my life and the property and my world. I'm just making up something, but it's plausible. She actually could wake up at a moment. It could be a much smaller thing that says, okay, I'm ready, especially because you made it clear that you're ready to help her. So she could stay there and something terrible happened. She could have a small thing happen that wakes her up. She also, honestly, could just pass peacefully in the night, right?
Yeah.
So you think those through. So imagine her passing peacefully, imagining something happening that triggers mom's decision to sell the property, move to assisted living or something like that, or win with you or whatever you're thinking. And then or she could have the original thing, which I'm scared she's going to leave the stove on, burn her house down or something like that. So all those, if you think them through, are plausible. And as you think about them, you should be experiencing a little less stress and probably a little more energy to start thinking, yeah, how do I talk to her? How do I set up? You know, you're already, once we get the stress to go, the problem solving sort of kind of kicks in. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank
Yeah.
you.
And it's really kind of not that hard, but sort of is, because it's a skill to learn. And most skills we can understand. You know, I can understand, Stephen, that you can take what rifle did y'all use? M something?
16A4.
There you go, an M16A4. So I can understand that you know how to take it apart, which pieces, which sequence, what to clean, where the main places that gum up are, blah, 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 how to pop it back together. But that doesn't mean I can do it. So when I explain something as simple as, hey, generate 3 options, you know, in the book, I have Dr. Fred's handy dandy anti-anxiety checklist. And I go through a checklist for you, and it's great, but you have to practice it. You know, I started learning this, a bunch of sources, but one of my favorites was an old guy named Epictetus and a guy named Marcus Aurelius. So these were Stoic philosophers. Marcus Aurelius was an emperor philosopher. If you ever saw Gladiator, he was the old guy that Johnny Cash killed. Well, Joaquin Phoenix, who played Johnny Cash later. That's the way I like to think of it. The bad son. So these folks figured out that it's not what happens to us, it's how we think about it. And so the way I like to frame it is, it's really hard for us as entrepreneurs to think crooked and walk straight. What you're wanting to do is straighten your thinking out. And so part of what we're doing, Liz, is trying to just think a little bit, and we didn't spend much time on it at all, but a little bit about mom and thing and her worry about herself and her role and the story. But as we just thought it through, move some pieces around, you get perspective, and life gets way easier. It's kind of like in negotiations. You ever been in a negotiation? And you're sitting here, and what happens is you think, well, they're gonna say no, they're gonna say yes, instead of noticing, do y'all know that y'all just agreed on everything but about this much of price, not the whole price, and not $1 million. We're wrestling over $50,000 right here. It's a $50,000 problem. It's not a $2 million problem, right? And so once you can think that way, you get to say to somebody, look, it's a $50,000 problem, you know? Why don't we split the difference, and I'll buy you a Starbucks card, and let's get on with this. And I go, well, that sounds good, you know? But that comes by thinking in a fresh, clearer way. All right, tell me what you're thinking, so to speak.
Well, I'm certainly loving this, because this is something that, you know, I preach continuously to all of my groups and stuff. You know, every single week we go over
There you go.
Stoic, and we always talk about these things because it is how you frame it. You know,
Exactly.
even in my book, the entire premise of my book was reframing your life, transforming your truth by rethinking about things in a different light. And it's so simple, but like you said, it's a skill. It's not something that's like, oh yeah, turn lemons into lemonade. I'm solved. I'm healed. I'm saved. Let's go.
Right.
Hallelujah. Right. It's not
Exactly.
like that. It's
No,
much
exactly.
deeper. You have to actually apply it every day until you reprogram this thing up here. And then you start seeing things, but then you just can't let it. It's like a car. Once you give it an oil change one time, you're not good for the next 50,000 miles. You're good for the next 10,000. You're good for the next week, but then you need to continuously refresh it. You need to re-implement that way of thinking and straightening everything out.
Perfect. So what I've learned, renewing this thing is good. For me, I found it even more helpful. I mean, I'm a fan of renewing our mind. But I would talk about learning something, like really learning. And it's sort of what they call overlearning. But learning, when you learn something, here's the trick. And honestly, if I die like this afternoon, this is the thing I would have said if you said, hey, tell me something real quick before you die that's important. I'd go, this, okay? So I didn't mean for our whole thing to be about death. Apparently, this is a conversation we're all having. So when you learn something, it's really about speed of access. So how quickly in a skill game can you access something, or in a knowledge game can you access something? So if I learn somebody's name, speed of access means I know it. I don't have to go, what was his name? The crane. I remember a bird and it was on his head and it was poking him and he was saying, Steve Harvey, save me, or some memory trick I did to remember Stephen Crane, right? So I don't have to do that. I just know Stephen Crane. There's no Stephen Crane. But it's the same thing like with renewing your mind. Like when you get to where you can know how to deal with your anxiety, you just speed of access. Let me generate 2 other options. And let me settle on that and chill out so I can get on with the business of solving it. I'll tell you something too. I'll warn you, if you start learning to think this way, it's disorienting, because if you've been really used to foinking, imaginary negative consequences and over controlling all the dominoes and all, when you start getting out of that, you're caught suddenly going, well, how am I going to plan what to do? Because you're used to an over controlling strategy. And the answer is, what you'll do as you come out of that confusion is you'll start living out principles. And it won't be so much of an over controlling thing. It's more ninja Mandalorian type work, where I've got some skills, I've got some principles, I've got a little understanding of human nature, So in a sales process, you're going to figure out with speed of access, without controlling they have to buy, you're going to get a different philosophy and says, I don't want to sell to people that we're not a match for, but I really want them to understand if we can help them, we're the answer to their prayers. And so when you take that approach, well, what's my philosophy? Well, I understand human nature. They're into what's in it for me, and they should be. That's human. So I go, what's your problem? I figure out their problem, and then I magnify their problem. So like, if it keeps going on, what's going to happen? And get them to tell me. And they're like, ooh, that's a really bad problem. Well, look at our solution and imagine a future with our solution, what that's going to be like. By the way, here's a little proof, social and or statistics or logic or whatever, that explains exactly what this is going to be. So again, your path without our solution, your path with our solution, yay. And guess what? If you do the math on the cost, it's going to pay for itself, or however you figure that out. So, do you want 2 or 3 to begin with? I don't know, call to action, right? It's just a frame, but you have some principles that are going on because you're thinking about what's human nature and what do we offer, and then what do I value, like not forcing it on them, but just trying to find, is there a match around that problem? Does that make sense? I didn't mean to give a short course on sales, but I like that stuff.
No, it's perfect. One of my favorite things to do at the beginning of every sales call, as people like to call them, is, hey, can we just agree? Can we just be grown men and women here? At the end of this call, I'm gonna ask for your business. If it makes sense, great. If not, no problem. But we're not gonna kid each other. We're not gonna go back and forth. I'm not gonna try to hard sell you, and you're not gonna give me excuse after excuse. Just tell me if this is a good fit or not. Fair? All right.
Yeah. Let's be real. Let's keep it real. Yeah, Wakanda forever, So that always freaks people out, an old person doing that. So let's talk about problem solving. Let's switch gears a little bit, okay? With the remaining 15, 20 minutes, whatever we got left. So problem solving is a problem, because one of the keys you want to learn to do is to quit problem solving, actually. So let me explain this contradiction. What we tend to do is we get into what I do call problem soothing, not problem solving. And so the way this works is you have a problem, and that problem generates pain, and that pain moves you to take action. And that action reduces the pain, and that reduces the action. So the problem continues. It's like the baggage at Southwest, right? And that's part of the challenge we have with problems, that we don't think in terms of a solution, and I would argue a goal, we're busy just trying to give it some relief, and that perpetuates it. What I invite people to do, one of the things I like to do, there are a couple of things. First, I try to get people to ask and answer the question, what do they want? So usually I get them to define the problem, and then I go later and say, what do you want? By the time we define that, it's different. And this is the thing. There are no problems on the planet. Not one. Not one with your mama, not one with the neighbors, not one with people you teach, not one with clients, students. It doesn't, there are no problems on the planet at all until somebody wants something. The moment somebody wants something, we got a problem, right? So Ohio State, let's say, plays University of Alabama, my alma mater. Y'all are up there somewhere. And somebody wins, somebody loses. Half of us are sad, half of us are happy, right? Problem for some, not a problem for others. Only because of what we want. And if we had all been born in Indiana, we'd probably be for Notre Dame, for all I know. I don't know. It's just the way it goes. But we act like this stuff is a big deal. So there's kind of the game. You want to figure out, what do I want? Because the actual solution to a problem is going to be a goal. And a goal, if you achieve it, that'll naturally take care of the problem, is really what you want. And so there are these elements that come together. They're the pieces that you're looking at, but you're really trying to say, what is it I really want? So years ago, I was at the University of Alabama, and I had met my future wife, bumped into her at a thing, and I had this rule that I'd only ask a girl out 3 times. Okay. If she turned me down 3 times, I can take a hint. I found out later, apparently that's a big number. Most guys, it's like a half a time or something. But I had this 3-time rule. And so I called her up. There was a reason. I was not dating for a while, took a break to get a little sane. Some spiritual things going on in my life. And so when it came time, I wanted to ask her out. I bumped into her, seen her. And so I called her up and I asked her out for the next weekend, a date. And she said, no, I've got to go to a wedding out of town. And I went, okay, well, how about the next weekend? And she said, no, I got to see a man about a dog or wash my hair. I can't remember, something like that. And so I said, okay, and I hung up and I realized, oh my gosh, strike 2. I got one more shot at this. And so I started thinking about it even back then when I was starting to learn this stuff of how can I make this so blatantly clear that she will either reject me or not, just totally clear, and really give her the opportunity to absolutely say yes. And so as I thought about it with this one last shot, I went and bought a calendar, probably had puppies on it or something. I didn't have money, but bought a little calendar. And I bumped into her. Now, I wasn't stalking. I roughly knew her pattern, tried the house to the education building. It wasn't complicated back then. So I bumped into her. And I said, hi, Joe, blah, blah, blah. I said, oh, I bought you a gift. And I pulled this calendar out and I gave it to her. And I said, now, what I've done, she looked at me, like, this is weird. And I said, what I did is I marked in there everything I'm doing for the next year. And if you'd pick another time when I'm not busy, I'd like to take you on a date. So, and here we are, married 40 years later with 5 kids and 11 grandkids. But that was the kind of thinking and the kind of frame that we need for most problems. So what you want to do is really clarify what you want. And then number 2, try to think about, how could I solve this forever? What goal, if accomplished, would solve it forever? You may not figure that out, but it's the way to think. So you're not thinking about just, I'm not trying to make payroll just this month and next month. That's what we get caught into. And then it comes around. It's the baggage, right? It keeps coming around and we're caught and we're challenged and we're frustrated. Rather, wait a minute, how do I solve this forever? And it's going to be something about stabilizing cash flow probably, and revenue, and some steadier gain, really about even in the sales process. And you might look at it and go, oh gosh, if I had a big enough pipeline, all my sales issues get taken care of. And so you see there's a leverage point that what I really need is to keep working on this pipeline. What I do is I sell, take care of people, and then I'm out of people, and then I got to drum up pipeline, and then there's a delay in the system, and I'm about broke, and then I got it figured out, and I take a breather, and I can't stand the stress, and so I go to the lake for a weekend, and then I come back, and it all starts over again, right? Yeah. So I got 2 words for you. Stop it. Just stop it. But in solving a problem, when you start thinking, how do I solve this forever? It lets you start looking at it from a leverage viewpoint, some other things. There's obviously more to the process, but when you think this way, specifically about what I want and what goal, if accomplished, would take care of it, that the problem itself would be kind of a sub point, a byproduct, that it's not the real problem. The real problem is generated by what I want. I'll give you one more example. So a few years ago, one of my clients was a really upper level VP in a very large independent oil and gas company. And they had a project that had a pipe that went under the North Sea in Britain. So the Britons and the Italians, and there may have been Germans and Finnish, I don't know who was in it. So there's a bunch of them. There's some complexity and problems, but they had a stuck pig. So a pig and is reminds me of like a giant plastic marshmallow. It's about the size of the pipe, and they run it through the pipe with solvents and all to clean the paraffin out. So paraffin will build up in pipes and clog them, and so they don't work. So they had a stuck pig stuck in the paraffin. How do we get it out? No flow, no money. And they wanted to sell this property. So as I'm Zooming with him, he's over in the UK, and we're talking about this. We got issues with key players involved and confusions and bad science and, bad solvents and all kinds of stuff to get this pig stuck. I finally said, so what do you want? And I made him work on that. And he finally said, all I want is 100% flow. So you want 100% flow, so the pipe just constantly flowing. Exactly. I said, well, that's very helpful. And I said, what would it take to get 100% flow? And as we talked about it, it needed a new team. So he was able to reconfigure, get somebody move over from the States, put together a new team, had this new vision for everybody, 100% flow, did it down the workers up, the Italians, the Germans, everybody's involved. We all got what we're trying to do, because the pig was just a sub point. Because there are a lot of other factors that go into 100% flow. Within a few months, it's solved, and then they sold it for $1.5 billion. It's crazy. All because of asking a question like, what do you want? You don't have to be a genius if you just can ask a genius question, right? What's the old story of the truck was caught, the 18-wheelers caught under this low underpass, and they had all the cranes out and all trying to figure out how to get it free. And a little boy on a bike came by and said, why don't you let air out of the tires? A lot of life's that way. All right, what are you thinking, Stephen?
Well, this has been absolutely amazing, Dr. Fred. And just that last point, a lot of times we have 1,000 different ideas and 1,000 different problems and fears and anxieties. It's just like the left part of your book, right? It's this tangled mess. But sometimes all it takes is a third eye perspective of what's going on, or just someone like a coach just asking a question, just asking a genuine, I'm curious, Liz, why is this a big deal? What's the worst thing that could happen? Or what's this? Just asking a simple question can actually help calm the mind and be like, well, you know what? And then you start to level out and you start to unround all that, nonsense. And you actually realize, oh, it's very simple. Why did I make it so complicated? And then it's a continuous process. So I love this. This is what I practice and preach every day. I truly appreciate your time. Liz, did you have anything for Dr. Fred?
I just want to thank you for your time. I thought it was very very insightful for me because it is an anxiety problem for me, and I am a kind of a control freak to a certain degree, and not being able to actually just control the situation. So thank you for sharing your thoughts on that. It really did make me feel a little different about my worries this morning. So I'm going
Good.
to focus on your advice, and thank you so much for that. I really did appreciate that.
Well, I tell you, it's hard to read the label from inside the bottle. That's
Yes.
that's part of what we need each other for. More Socratic, interactive discussion, think through, new perspective. Yeah, it's really huge. Honestly, probably the most practical thing I've experienced from this is not getting upset when I'm driving anymore. So I get behind people that are driving slow. Like, what is wrong with you people? There are the signs. You're 5-10 miles below. I have places to be. I got stuff to do. Why are you in my way? And then I start going, well, you don't know their story. What if it's an old person that can't see well and they're just barely getting there? In fact, they're going to get their medicine. Or what if they're slowing down to turn? Interstate, that's usually is it, in my experience. Or what if something's broken on their car and they don't know the speed limit, Or what if it's just a cautionary thing? My mother would never let the gas tank get below a quarter of a tank. Never would. Maybe some people just keep it in range, keep under the speed limit just so they don't ever have any chance of the police really getting them. I don't know. But when I even just do that for practice on a road, I can relax. And then, you learn, that getting there 2 minutes early, you don't really want to see these people have time anyway. So why is an extra 2 minutes with them worth it? I'm just thinking of seeing relatives. Sorry.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dr. Fred. Really appreciate it.
All right. Bless you. Keep up the good work up there.